Hello, everyone. Today is April the 1st, 2025, and this is the cosmic weather for the upcoming month of April. My name is Philip Young. I am a professional astrologer. I have my practice location in Cumming, Georgia, but I work with people from all around the world and have been doing so since 2013, when I actually hung out my shingle to do this work and to do it professionally. So what I want to do tonight or today, it's actually tonight for me, but the focus of the upcoming month of April is talk about the cosmic weather astrologically and what we can expect in the month of April. And of course, there's just a tremendous amount going on. We just finished up March and had two eclipses in March. We've also had two retrogrades go into effect. Mercury is still currently retrograde. Venus is still currently retrograde. They both started their retrograde energy in Aries, and they're going to go back into Pisces. They'll both go direct this month, and that will be an important shift energetically. There's also going to be, to me, probably one of the more significant transits between Mars and Pluto. There'll be a third interaction that will be in opposition that started all the way back in November of 2024. And it's a pretty disruptive energy. And I think we're going to continue to see the kinds of disruptions that we've been observing. If you've been paying attention to the news, it's definitely a very volatile time. There's a lot of instability and a lot of worry and concern, which are all very valid. If you've watched any of my previous videos, I will do a quick recap of what is kind of setting the stage for what we're dealing with and why this year is in many ways a peak year in terms of a long-term process of really kind of breaking things down in order to be rebuilt. And it's not going to be about fixing things. It's going to be about them being really kind of destroyed in order to be space for something new that could be an improvement or could be just what is necessary to keep things going, even though it won't look like what it did 10, 15, 20 years ago. So the major issues in terms of slow moving planets and history involve, I'm going to start first with Pluto, which finished up its time in Capricorn permanently on November the 19th, 2024. And the last time it was in Capricorn was the time leading up to and after the Revolutionary War. So the Revolutionary War is the key words to hear about Pluto in Capricorn. That energy started in 2008 at the time of the financial crisis, and also, did include, of course, COVID and the arrival of COVID and these large systems that we're seeing deconstructed in many ways, shaping a new sort of society, which is Pluto in Aquarius, which it will be for the next 20 years. Coinciding with that is Neptune in Pisces, and the last time that was the case was in 1847 up to 1862, so the lead up to in the first 2 years of the Civil War. Again, that kind of energy where it's a battle of ideologies. We've definitely seen a clear splitting of that repeated in terms of the last three elections where the electorate has been split almost 50-50. And we've definitely seen this sort of red-blue energy, which is no different than north-south. It's even tied to those origin points, if we will. We also have Uranus in Taurus. The last time it was there was 1934 to 1942. So, of course, Great Depression and World War II. So we have three transits that individually at different times in history related to major wars, and we have those in place now. I think it's probably safe to say that we're already in a type of world war. It's not the traditional war in which the entire planet's involved in military action, but definitely economically in terms of tariffs, trade, battles with economies, all of that is very much in play. And then there are individual actual physical wars happening in different locations that might spread to other locations under these transits and over this period of time. But without a doubt, we're seeing the kind of disruption that comes with what these transits did previously in history, but now they're doing it all together. And what's making this year and next year particularly intense is that the outer planets, three of them, will be transitioning out of one sign and into another sign. That will include Neptune and Saturn moving from Pisces into Aries for part of this year, and then back into Pisces, and then permanently into Aries in 2026 at the beginning of 2026. And then we will have Uranus moving out of Taurus and into Gemini the middle of this year, then back into Taurus, and then permanently into Gemini in the middle of 2026. So it is definitely a period in which we will see a lot of major shifting occur that's going to be resetting the rules, if you will. Now, each month, what I'd like to talk about is what's going on in terms of the behavior of the planets. First of all, dealing with ingress, which is when a planet moves from one sign to another. And the primary ingresses are usually each month Mercury going from one sign or even from two signs to other signs, and then Venus going usually from one sign. Mars will do it periodically every other month, depending on its speed and where it is in the charts or in the sky. And then the other planets, as I mentioned, are going to move. Now, Neptune is unique in that it just went directly into Aries at the end of March. So now we have a different kind of energy that's going to be more direct, more pioneering, more aggressive. And that's going to be followed by Saturn coming into Aries. And that's going to be happening also relatively soon. And that's going to create some new energy for us to consider as well. And then the question of what's going on with the retrogrades, if there are any energies that are behaving in a retrograde fashion. And we do have Venus and we do have Mars, both retrograde, and that is carrying over from this past month. Uh, Venus went retrograde on the 8th of March, and Mercury went retrograde on the 16th of March. And they're going to both go direct in this upcoming month of April. And so again, we've got this energy of retrograde, which is causing us to reflect and to go back into ourselves and to reconsider things. And with Mercury, it has to do with our thinking, and with Venus, it has to do with our relationships. So let's sort of begin by looking at what's going to happen in terms of actual ingress and changing of signs. So the sun is the first one to talk about. It ingresses roughly around the 19th, 20th, and 21st of every month. And the sun will go on April the 19th out of Aries and into the sign of Taurus. That means that we're going to have more energy focused in Taurus once it gets out of Aries on our foundations, what it is that makes us feel secure and safe. Not surprising that the transition, and it's interesting how certain things in the world work in relation to astrology, but you know, the tax season is up until the 15th of April, and then it's kind of like, well, where are we after we've paid our taxes? Where is our foundation as you go into the Taurian energy that will be the 19th through the remainder of the month of April? Now, Mercury will actually go direct on April the 8th. It will be in Pisces when it does that. And then it will get back to Aries on April the 16th. And it will then begin its journey back through Aries. It was already in Aries for part of the time. While it's in Pisces up until the 16th, there's a bit more of a reflection on our beliefs. Why do we believe what we believe? And how are our beliefs being affected by what's going on in the world around us? You know, where do we see ourselves now based on what we believe and the impact of the changing economic structure, the changing landscape of the world around us? Then once we get to Aries on the 16th, there will be sort of a sharpening of the mind, a little bit more sense of clarity and more of an intention to speak clearly about what you've been ruminating on while Mercury has been in the retrograde phase. Now, Venus began its retrograde phase and will go direct. Well, it started its retrograde phase back in March, but it will go direct on April the 14th. And then it will make its way back into Aries at the end of the month on April the 30th. So for the better part of the month, Venus will be in Pisces. And that does mean that once again, it is sort of trying to feel our way through relationships. We may have things that shift in relationships that we're reflecting on. But once that direct energy hits, then it will be about some decisions that we have to implement. Now, it'll still be operating under Piscean energy, which is kind of going with the flow and trusting what it is you feel is the, I guess, in a way, spiritual identity of your relationships and what you want those to become. And then once it hits Aries, we back in that energy of pioneering, aggression, initiation, being direct. So it's interesting that Mercury and Venus are sort of doubling down in the Aries Pisces energy over this period of time. And then that retrograde energy also is in effect with both of these both of these points. So interestingly enough, by the time we get to April the 14th and then April the 16th, all the energies will be direct. And again, that creates a very strong push of energy to get things accomplished and to move things forward. Now, just a quick review of where the outer planets are at this time. Jupiter is in Gemini and will be there until June the 10th. So there's still a continuing expansion of knowledge and energy through communication. So once again, a lot of talking heads doing a lot of talking about what's going on. And when that energy hits Cancer in June, there will be a shift where, in some ways, the Jupiterian energy will be brought down into a more focused question of what matters to us. But while it's in Gemini, it is just constant flying around of knowledge, information, thoughts, opinions, all of that. It's going to be continue to be a wild ride throughout this month with Jupiter still in Gemini. Saturn will continue its journey through Pisces and then make its way it will actually make its way eventually into Aries again. And what that means is that we'll be looking at a shift when it gets to Aries of having to focus more on this question of independence. And that is going to, really be part of what we will see when we get into May, when that energy actually shifts out of Pisces and into Aries, which will happen in the month of May. But until then, until that happens, it's still a question of what are we trying to structure in terms of our beliefs? And what are we seeing as the beliefs taking on structure in the world around us? Now, Chiron is in Aries and will remain in Aries for the entire month. That's this wounding healing energy around our independence. And we're probably seeing that question of what can we count on? And interestingly enough, this is tied to the US chart where Chiron was in Aries at the birth of the nation. So this question of independence and being independent entities within the actual structure of the United States and the United States having its own independence is definitely being brought into play right now, which has somewhat to do with this new sort of surge of isolationism that is showing up politically, where the United States is kind of decoupling a bit from the global environment, which is in some ways where the wound is happening. It's not really truly feasible. The idea that we can decouple and make that work, no matter how it's sort of set up, is a little bit fantastical, actually, because our products are not just a single product, whether we're talking about how cars are made or computers are made or anything that's somewhat sophisticated. Parts come in from all different parts of the world, and the manufacturing that puts them together sometimes happens in different parts of the world. But even if you have something that is, let's say, and we can simply reference Tesla. Tesla has its, industry in the United States, but the parts that go into the vehicle, they come from all around the world. So the idea that we're going to be just doing everything within in-house, if you will, is a little bit far-fetched. And it's creating a desire for that kind of independence, but it doesn't really reflect the reality, which is where the wound comes in. Uranus is in Taurus, so we're going to continue to see these foundational shifts. This will be all of this month. Once again, Uranian energy in Taurus is reflecting, to me, more the change in the basic society that we experienced historically from 1934 to 1942. Certainly, the Great Depression and World War II are powerful dynamic events, but it's more the day-to-day that is continually being affected. And we'll continue to see that happening with this energy. As I said, Neptune is now going to be in Aries this month, and that does mean a bit more of a tightening of, well, where are the beliefs going? What are the results that are actually happening? And so if you look at standing systems that are being disrupted, whether it's people in federal agencies or whether it is federal agencies taking a different tact in how they're going to be doing things, that is going to represent that new Aries energy. And in some ways, it is a drive towards the concept of smaller government or the concept of what do the beliefs look like when we have to literally take care of ourselves. And because it's Neptune and also the Uranus Taurus piece, I don't think it's out of the realm to be cognizant that the largest systems, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, could end up being either deeply modified or completely removed. Where does that leave people? And this energy this year, I think if you're listening to this and you share this with someone, the idea of thinking about what if I or someone I am connected to is relying on a government service or is relying on Social Security, what would it look like if those things do not exist, say within the next 3 to 5 years? Maybe they're still there, but to position oneself with the idea that they may actually crumble could be a very vital move to make under these particular transits. Once again, being that if you do create solutions that alleviate your need for those things, if they still exist, then they just become a benefit that is an enhancement or an addition. But if you're relying solely on them and they do have a fragility, which they do have right now, and could be broken or reduced in a significant way, and you're not making moves to take that into account, you could be missing a very vital opportunity to make sure that you're not going to be swept up in a tsunami of change that is very much a possibility with the transits that we're dealing with. And again, remember that the transits that happen that are happening right now, Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II. I mean, I can't be more clear that these are no joke transits that are happening right now. And so if you're listening to this and you're wanting to understand that it is a perfect time to get very making some radical changes within your own situation towards frugality, towards living below your means, towards clearing out any debt, this is definitely the time to take action and get that accomplished. And then we've got Pluto in Aquarius, which means that we know that society, the ideals are going to undergo fundamental change. They're going to go through death and rebirth energy. Now, unfortunately, I always look at astrology in a sort of neutral way. And what I mean by neutral is there are ways that it gets expressed that can be what we consider positive, right? We look at an Aquarian idealism of an egalitarian society or a meritocracy. Or we could absolutely be looking at some sort of oligarchy or maybe even an authoritarian dictatorship. All that Aquarius really wants is a very defined idealistic expression. And this expression is then tied to how the society and the civilization presents itself. And that's what we're going to be going through over the next 20 years. Now, in terms of this month and the transits, what's happening between the planets that are moving in the sky and how they're affecting all of us, there are some positive energies there. Saturn, and by positive, I don't mean good. I mean that they create, flow of energy. The trick of positive is sometimes is that if the flow is going in a negative direction, like a hard or harmful direction, the positivity will reinforce it. It's like a positive feedback loop. So Saturn is currently in Pisces and it is forming a sextile with Uranus and Taurus. And that's going to be from February 28th all the way through till April 30th. Now, that means that the energy of Saturn and Taurus are trying to complement one another, but they are in tricky positions in that Saturn is an earth sign that likes things defined, and Pisces is a water energy that likes things to be free flowing. Uranus is an airish energy that wants to be disruptive and revolutionary, and Taurus is a fixed energy that of the earth that wants things to be consistent. So if this energy is marshaled in a healthy way, it encourages practical yet creative solutions, merging spiritual ideas with tangible progress. So that is really one of the best ways it could present itself, and that will be available to us this entire month. The first week is really going to be very active. Mars in Cancer will square with Chiron in Aries, and that will happen from March the 9th all the way through till April 3rd. So that's carrying over from last month and going to wrap up in this first week. And that's a high tension energy. And it's around emotional security and self-assertion. So once again, I think what we're seeing is this disruption of services and how that's affecting us in terms of how we take care of ourselves, as well as where our independence is. That's what's getting triggered, and it will, in many ways, kind of finish what it's meant to be doing by April the 3rd. And I think there's supposed to be a fairly prominent tariff announcement on the 2nd, which, depending on how that goes, could very much play well with this particular square. It could create, again, more instability, driving us to these questions of, well, how capable am I or the people that I care about, especially if you have older parents, how can they take care of themselves if this disruption continues to go the direction it seems to be currently going, which in its own way is kind of a necessary move. And then Mars in Cancer is also having a trine or a collaborative interaction with Saturn in Pisces from March the 19th to April the 10th. So again, it's not that it's only difficulties, it's that there are, when you recognize what the challenges are, there's energy that you can utilize, but you have to utilize it correctly. So the idea being that if you are taking any extra money you have and you have debt, you're paying that debt off. Or you're taking that money and you're putting it into savings, or you're finding diversification depending on your level of wealth for your investments that help keep you fairly protected. If you have a chance to pull your family together and combine resources, these transits that are complementary, like Mars in a trine with Saturn, or the sextile with Saturn and Taurus, those things can come together fairly well. So there's an ability to take advantage of that. And that's what I really want to emphasize about this first week in April and really the energy that's going on around. And then we have also carrying over from the end of March and through April the 10th, Mars in a sextile with Uranus. And again, this is requiring making changes that are fairly radical. This is kids moving back in. This is you moving in with your kids. It is finding people that you're like, hey, wait a second. If we can do it, let's one of us sell our property and we're good friends and let's get into each other, the other person's property. That's all energy that is available to think in terms of what does a frugal energy look like and how do you take advantage of your network of resources and create a buffer for very disruptive energy that's out there that is not going to let up. It's just not. It's not going to let up for another, honestly, 3 to 5 years. But it's going to be really aggressive during 2025 and 2026 because of those outer points transitioning from one sign to the other. And then in 2027, Chiron will make its transition out of Aries and into Taurus. So this is just where we are. And I really want to put the message out to people, mainly to say, try to figure out strategies that recognize that on some level, this is truth and consequences. This is the end of abundance. This is the bill is finally due with the amount of debt that's out there. And what do you need to do to, quite honestly, protect yourself? Now, in the second week of April, it's really just a carryover. So Saturn and Pisces sextiles with Uranus still going on. Mars and Cancer in the trine with Saturn still going on. And Mars and Cancer sextiling with Saturn or with Uranus still going on. So April the 8th to April the 15th is actually an excellent time to make forward progress, to implement anything that might be a radical solution, but does create greater protection. That's going to be the hot week. Absolutely. So if there's a time to make a move or to put something in place, that week would be the week to do it. Now, on the next week, April 16th to the 23rd, still Saturn in Pisces sextiling with Uranus and Taurus. That's carrying over all the way till the end of the month. But now what we're going to get is Leo, Mars will move into Leo and it will trine with Neptune in Aries. And that is going to create a connection to your passion and your pursuit of aligning your goals with your ideals and trying to blend assertive energy with intuitive guidance. So once again, there's a current of having access to wisdom and knowledge and the energy to make changes. But this will also be the week when there's going to be a significant opposition, and that's going to be Mars and Leo opposing or trying to find balance with Pluto and Aquarius. And this is difficult because Mars deals with the god of war, Pluto is the god of death. They're in connection with each other. The opposition is a straining of trying to find a balance. And this is going to be about power-driven energy that fuels conflicts and challenges. And it's going to be a struggle or a desire to assert control, which could lead again to tensions. This will be the third time they oppose each other. And this will be the first time that they're opposing each other in the sign of Leo, which is leadership, and Aquarius, which is community. So what we're going to see is a real tension between the leadership and the community. So I think what we're realizing is the leadership that's come on and what is being done is being highly disruptive to the community. And this period of the middle of April is really going to come to bear understanding just how disruptive that actually is. And the question will be, does the leadership adjust? Does the community adjust, or do they just get further apart? I think we're going to see that awareness in that week of April the 19th all the way until the end of the month, which is April the 30th. That's going to be that opposition. And then we're going to have on April the 20th to October the 22nd, we're going to have Neptune in Aries in a sextile with Pluto in Aquarius. So once again, there is energy to bring about breakthroughs, spiritual growth, and the pursuit of innovative ideas and channel those visions into practical action. So in some ways, the disruption is the source of innovation. And so the idea being that there's going to be a need to get creative with the solutions because the old solutions are going to be really in their death throes, if you will. And that means things like, well, what would it look like if there were no universities? What would it look like if there was no Social Security? What would society have to do in order to, as individuals, take care of ourselves? But if we're going to, work with people, how do we create that care at the end of our lives if we don't have these old systems in place? And again, what does this mean in terms of taking care of our food, our water, all of these things? This is all going to require some real creative, innovative energy. And Neptune in a sextile with Pluto is showing us that these big changes are also going to be under an undercurrent of the overall situation. And then the final week of April is just going to be a carryover of energies. Saturn in Pisces in sextile with Uranus and Taurus, that's going to reach its end point. Mars and the opposition in Leo to Pluto in Aquarius, that will be in play the final week. And then, of course, that Neptune Aries sextile, that's going to carry over into May and all the way through to October, in fact. So, again, the idea here is that it's still the rapids. We're still in the rapids. And what can you do to try to acknowledge that and that it's going to be an ongoing situation and it's going to be intense in this particular month with these particular transits that are going on. So again, I really want to try to emphasize that it's going to be hard. But if you're getting a chance to hear my message and other messages that are trying to say, yes, hard is what's happening. What can you do being aware of that to take care of yourself? How do you do that on a financial level? How do you do that on a living level? How do you do that on a community level? You're going to be able to navigate this in as good a way as possible. So I hope everyone is doing well and making their way through and that this information does prove to be useful to you. All the best.